In the year 2 BC, an up-and-coming 17-year-old named Gaius Caesar set out on a journey to Rome's eastern provinces. The heir apparent of Caesar Augustus bade farewell to his grandfather and 4 siblings. Augustus had paved the way for Gaius to succeed in his first diplomatic mission. His inexperienced grandson went equipped with the experience of the learned men and skilled generals he'd appointed to accompany Gaius to Armenia, a kingdom of critical importance to Rome's domination of the East. It's no surprise then that some senators were nervously hoping Augustus would abandon the notion of sending a youth to resolve the situation. But how was Gaius able to face such a daunting task with so much confidence? Hidden among those seasoned advisors was a sycophant and flatterer, with a long and distinguished career, and an agenda of his own. His name was Marcus Lollius. He'd entered public life as a young legate for Marcus Junius Brutus, and fought on the side of the Republic at Philippi. He'd escaped proscription under the Second Triumvirate by means of a scheme whereby he sold himself into slavery, after arranging to be purchased by a trustworthy friend. That friend was Quintus Aemilius Lepidus, who later appealed to Marcus Agrippa on Lollius's behalf. Not only was his name removed from the proscription lists, but his fate changed with his loyalties, as Lollius fought with the victors, Caesar Divi Filius and Marcus Agrippa, at the Battle of Actium. And his talent for diplomacy did not go unnoticed with the passing of time. In 25 BC, Marcus Lollius was given a signal honor. Caesar Augustus appointed him to serve as the very first governor of the new Roman province of Galatia, where he would seek to ingratiate himself and Rome with the Galatian peoples. He succeeded in training the army of the former King Amyntas, incorporating them into the Roman Legio XXII, Dioteriona. But he also founded a Roman settlement in Galatia, the ancient equivalent of a billboard advertising the wonders of the advanced civilization that accompanied Roman expansion, and a brilliant way to do it, without causing violence in the province. Then, in 19 BC, 2 years after he'd served a term as a Roman consul, Caesar Augustus had appointed him governor of Macedonia, where Marcus Lollius had marched to battle, defeating tribes of raiding Thracians. Another 2 years and Augustus would appoint him governor of Gaul, where he would oversee those legions guarding the Rhine River. But in 16 BC, Marcus Lollius's star would fall. An alliance of Germanic tribes made up of the Sicambri, Tencteri, and Usipetes had crossed over the Rhine River and into Gaul. There, they laid in wait for the legions of Marcus Lollius before prosecuting a successful ambush. Known as the Clades Lolliana, or Lollian disaster, the loss of Lollius's legions to the Germanic ambush damaged his otherwise stellar military reputation. And though Marcus Lollius remained on friendly terms with Caesar Augustus after the Lollian disaster, he would never again command an army. For Lollius, insult was added to injury when Augustus chose his own stepson, Tiberius, to replace him as governor of Gaul. Tiberius's mere appearance in Gaul frightened the Germans so badly that they had quickly retreated back across the Rhine River. And there were the continuing successes of Tiberius in Gaul, along the Danuvius River, and in the annexation of Noricum. But rubbing salt into his wounded pride would not make Lollius want to kiss the feet of Tiberius. His nemesis, Tiberius, was now in exile, while Lollius held a senior posting alongside Gaius Caesar, not only the grandson and heir of Caesar Augustus, but also a young man who likely shared his mother Julia's disdain for his stepfather, Tiberius. As one of the impressive party of men flanking Gaius Caesar on his journey to the east, Marcus Lollius was well poised to influence the youth. In various ways, the others would eventually owe their growing prominence to their roles in the career of Gaius, including the senator Publius Quirinius, Aelius Sejanus, Lucius Domitius Barbus, and Velius Paterculus, the man who was both historian and eyewitness to these events. When the delegation reached the island of Samos, Gaius had an encounter with his stepfather Tiberius, who had traveled from the island of Rhodes to offer Gaius his official greeting. The journey had given Lollius just the space of time he had needed with Gaius, time enough to guarantee that Tiberius was treated to a cold reception. Given his own animosity toward a stepfather he may have seen as the cause of his mother Julia's downfall, Gaius must have been a pushover in the hands of a bitter Lollius. Once his fellow detractors rubbed elbows, Tiberius received only the faintest of social niceties from his stepson Gaius. By the time Gaius and his advisors got down to the business of planning his political strategy for settling the Armenian question, the centurions who guarded Gaius's person knew enough to intentionally exclude Tiberius from their meetings. Tiberius soon received word of the warm wishes of Marcus Lollius. Whether through his niece Livilla, the wife of Gaius, or from Velius Paterculus, a partisan of the Claudians, Tiberius somehow learned that Marcus Lollius had discreetly offered to bring Gaius Caesar, the head of the exile, should the heir of Augustus so desire it. Tiberius left Samos immediately, not in the least inspired by his covert knowledge, although he may not have known that his stepson rejected the offer. He returned to the island of Rhodes and immediately wrote to Augustus, suggesting that Marcus Lollius be removed as advisor to Gaius. But Marcus Lollius was not removed. As Gaius and his contingent arrived in the east, ambassadors and diplomats alike came from all over Rome's eastern provinces to pay homage, not to Gaius Caesar, but to Marcus Lollius, the distinguished military general who controlled access to the right arm of Caesar Augustus, the young Gaius Caesar. On January 1st of the year 1 AD, while in Syria, the 20-year-old Gaius Caesar formally assumed the office of consul, which had been postponed by his grandfather following his electoral victory at the age of 14. Now holding the imperium associated with his consular office, and the additional proconsular imperium bestowed on him at the request of Caesar Augustus, Gaius Caesar took command of the Syrian legions and prepared for battle. The year before assuming the consulship, Gaius and his entourage had toured the eastern provinces. This eastern tour served many purposes for Gaius. It gave him the opportunity to improve diplomatic relations with the Roman East, but also to explore the area to gather military information, whereby he might increase his military dignitas. Making it as far as the Gulf of Aqaba, the Roman prince found what he needed. Not yet endowed with the imperium associated with his upcoming consulship, Gaius could still legally enter the land of Egypt, where his scouts were sent down along the Red Sea to investigate the trail that had been forged some 18 years earlier by Aelius Gallus. Discovering what he required, Gaius returned to Syria, where he assumed his consular office, then marched his forces into the Nabatean lands. Under the advisement of his military personnel, Gaius Caesar waged a quick but successful military campaign against Arabian raiders who were invading the lands of the Nabateans. With a clear victory under his belt, Gaius, who now held imperium, made his way back to the sea, carefully skirting the border of Egypt so as not to break the law by entering. Committing his legions to the march back, Gaius and his retinue then boarded a ship and sailed northward, towards Antioch. As his ships passed by Judea, Gaius considered making a stop, thinking he might enter into Herod's temple in Jerusalem, where the people might witness him offering prayers. But, resting on the counsel of his trusted ministers, Gaius sailed past, a decision for which he was greatly praised by his grandfather, who also understood the potential for danger were a representative of Rome's new imperial cult religion to step inside Judea's temple, a sacred house of worship for the monotheistic Judeans. Landing in Syria later in 1 AD, Gaius Caesar was now prepared to receive the king of Parthia. Armenia had been invaded by Phraates IV, the ancient enemy of Marcus Antonius and Cleopatra. The old king had successfully taken Armenia, with inside help from Parthian nationalists who had surrounded Armenia's throne, and her king, Tigranes, who had been crowned by Tiberius. King Tigranes was ejected and fled to Rome. Because Armenia was essential to Rome's dominance in the east, it was the hope of King Phraates that his victory could be traded for the return of his 4 eldest sons. As hostages of Caesar Augustus, Phraates, Vonones, Seraspandes, and Rhodospes had been confined to life in Rome. In the year 23 BC, as recognition of Parthia's willingness to return Rome's stolen standards, Caesar Augustus had gifted a beautiful concubine to King Phraates IV. Her name was Musa. After giving birth to a son for the Parthian king, Musa had ascended the throne as the Queen of Parthia, where she then convinced her husband to send his eldest sons to Rome for education. By the time Gaius Caesar camped his Roman legions along the western bank of the Euphrates River in late 1 AD, King Phraates was dead, poisoned by Musa, who now ruled Parthia alongside her 18-year-old son, the new King Phraates, or Little Phraates. With his Parthian forces camped along the Euphrates eastern bank, Phraates and his mother petitioned that his brothers be returned from Rome. But Caesar Augustus understood that as soon as the 4 men returned to Parthia, they would be put to death in order to secure Phraates the throne. Augustus refused. However, with more of Gaius Caesar's troops still making their way from the Nabateans, and additional military support being sent east by order of Caesar Augustus, Phraates, who suffered political strife within his own court from Parthia's pro-Roman faction, did not want war with Rome. For 2 days, Gaius Caesar and King Phraates negotiated on a small island, which was visible from both banks of the Euphrates. Finally, a settlement was reached. King Phraates conceded Armenia to the control of the Romans, as well as abandoning the request that his elder half-brothers be delivered into his hands. After the agreement was finalized, Gaius Caesar prepared a feast for King Phraates on the west side of the Euphrates, and on the following night, King Phraates prepared a feast for Gaius Caesar on the east bank. During the celebrations, King Phraates blindsided Gaius with a stunning revelation. His chief advisor, Marcus Lollius, who controlled access to Gaius Caesar, had been using his position to greatly enrich himself and his family at the expense of the East's wealthy monarchs. Not only had Marcus Lollius promised King Phraates that he could bring Gaius Caesar round to fulfilling the Parthian king's desires for a very large sum of gold, but he had also kidnapped royal hostages throughout their year-long tour of the East, holding them for ransom until the royal families paid up. This he did in conjunction with commandeering and sending back to Rome whatever valuable artwork he could get his hands on. After receiving verification of Phraates' accusations from other sources, and on the advice of his grandfather, Caesar Augustus, Gaius Caesar formally renounced the friendship of Marcus Lollius, who was immediately removed from his posting by Caesar Augustus. the humiliated Marcus Lollius went away and drank poison. In spite of the Lollius affair, Gaius Caesar, by the age of 21, could attest to great success with the first military and diplomatic assignment given him by his grandfather, Caesar Augustus. But his celebrations were short-lived. Before the close of the 2 AD year, Gaius Caesar received a dispatch from Rome. His younger brother, the 17-year-old Lucius Caesar, was dead,